All right, we're going to be in 1 Samuel 21. We're going to start off with 1 through 9. And I'll start off with it. David went to Nob to Amalek the priest. Amalek trembled when he met him and asked, "Why are you alone? Why is no one with you?" David answered Amalek the priest, "The king sent me on a mission and said to me, 'No one is to know anything about the mission I am sending you on. As for my men, I have told them to meet me at a certain place. Now then, what do you have on hand? Give me 5 loaves of bread or whatever you can find.' But the priest answered David, 'I don't have any ordinary bread on hand. However, there is some consecrated bread here, provided the men have kept themselves from women.' David replied, 'Indeed, women have been kept from us, as usual, whenever I set out. The men's bodies are holy, even on missions that are not holy. How much more so today?' So the priest gave him the consecrated bread, since there was no bread there except the bread of the presence that had been removed from before the Lord and replaced by hot bread on the day that it was taken away. Now one of Saul's servants was there that day, detained before the Lord. He was Doeg the Edomite, Saul's chief shepherd. David said, 'Amalek, don't you have a spear or a sword here? I haven't brought my sword or any other weapon because the king's mission was urgent.' The priest replied, 'The sword of Goliath, the Philistine, whom you killed in the valley of Elah, is here. It is wrapped in a cloth behind the ephod. If you want to take it, there is no sword here but that one.' David said, 'There is none like it, give it to me.'" So a little brief history on this. David's currently on the run from Saul. Saul has blood for David right now. And so David goes into this temple, kind of lies to the priest real quick about why he was there. He said he was on a mission for the king, and he was not. Obviously, he's on the run from Saul. And he happened to see this servant Doeg, who he recognized immediately. That's why he's asking for a weapon, because he goes into this temple without any weapon. He knows Doeg is not a good person. He's an Edomite, which they have history with them. They've been long enemies of Israel. Even when the Israelites were in the wilderness for 40 days, they could not go into the Edomites' country. So that's the history on that. So that's why he kind of flips out when he sees them a little bit. Then we'll go to 22, 1 Samuel chapter 22, 6 through 10. We'll read that one real quick. Now Saul heard that David and his men had been discovered, and Saul was seated, spear in hand, under the tamarisk tree on the hill of Gibeah, with all his officials standing at his side. He said to them, "Listen, men of Benjamin, will the son of Jesse give all of you fields and vineyards? Will he make all of you commanders of thousands, of commanders of hundreds? Is that why you have all conspired against me? No one tells me when my son makes a covenant with the son of Jesse. None of you is concerned about me or tells me that my son has incited my servant to lie and wait for me, as he does today." But Doeg the Edomite, who was standing with Saul's officials, said, "I saw the son of Jesse come to Amalek, son of at Nob. Amalek inquired of the Lord for him. He also gave him provisions and the sword of Goliath the Philistine." Then the king sent for the priest Amalek, son of Adnab, and all the men of his family who were the priest of Adnab. And they all came to the king. Saul said, "Listen now, son of Adnab." "Yes, my lord," he answered. Saul said to him, "Why have you conspired against me, you and the son of Jesse, giving him bread and the sword, inquiring of God for him? And so that he has rebelled against me and lies in wait for me, as he does today." Amalek answered the king, "Who of all your servants is loyal as David, the king's son-in-law, captain of your bodyguard, and highly respected in your household? Was that the day the first time I inquired of God for him? Of course not. Let not the king accuse your servants or any of his father's family, for your servant knows nothing at all about this whole affair. But the king said, you will surely die, Amalek, and you and your whole family. Then the king ordered the guards at his side, turn and kill the priest of the Lord, because they too have sided with David. They knew he was fleeing, yet they did not tell him. But the king's officials were unwilling to raise a hand to strike the priest of the Lord. The king then ordered Doeg, you turn and strike down the priest. So Doeg the Edomite turned and struck them down. That day he killed 85 men who wore the linen ephod. He also put to the sword Nob, the town of the priests, with its men and women, its children and infants, and its cattle, donkeys, and sheep. Okay. So, what do you think of Doeg?
Completely out of his mind.
All right. So they said today they're talking about Doeg being an opportunistic person. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think he's saying, okay, if I do this, then I am going to be elevated in Saul's regime. So it's just a power grab.
Right now he's just ahead of all the sheep. So he was probably, at one point in time, I imagine, since he's an Edomite, he was at one time, I'm assuming, a warrior or something like that, but was eventually captured and turned into a servant. So he found an opportunity to kill people. A little twist on this, not a little twist, but I kind of more direction I want to go to. How did this all start? Do y'all remember?
Talking about Saul's jealousy of David?
Well, Saul's jealousy of David, but this whole incident with what did David do that he probably shouldn't have done that kind of led this direction? He went to the priest, went to the temple and the priest, and what did he do? Did he tell them the truth? Kind of put the priest in an awkward situation.
So are you saying, Ron, that when he describes that he's out on a king's mission, that was not completely true?
Yes. Now I'm not saying David was guilty of deceit. You know, obviously Saul and Doeg are guilty of murder, but could have that situation probably been avoided if David consulted the Lord before going into the temple.
I'm trying to think, when Jesus defends the Sabbath, isn't this one of the ones that he mentions that he ate the bread because they were hungry? That's what I thought. I was thinking if it was the time when they were walking through the grain fields or whatever, and yeah. I don't know, it's interesting. Because right before this is that, Jonathan and David had that covenant where it's like, if I shoot the arrow past you, then that means take off. Dad's after you. Dad's going to kill you. I couldn't see my dad being against you. I can't believe that my dad would be like this. But if he is, I'll shoot an arrow past you and let you know you need to get out of here. So David was running for his life from the son who said, Dad is going to kill you. So I'm not trying to justify the lie. But I don't know. There's just so much at work here. It's just like Jesus is like justifying his breaking the Sabbath with this incident.
Yeah.
Again, if I remember correctly. And Jonathan had just told him Dad's going to kill you. There's just so much at work here. I don't know that. That's what I thought. It was just Saul's jealousy. It was like it kind of results back to like how wicked jealousy can just destroy you, your family, your. I don't know. Yeah.
Saul also threw a spear at his own son.
Yeah. Yeah, you're with it. Yeah, you're
they're also referring to this whole incident, after the whole thing, like the Psalm 141:3. They are set a guard, O Lord, over my mouth, keep watch over the door of my lips. David believes David felt guilty for what he did for his little while. He did that kind of cause. And because one of Amalek's sons escapes and he meets him. And obviously David takes him under to protect him under this. But
And he takes the blame for it. He said it's my fault.
that's what he got. He says it's his fault.
So the 141:3, that refers directly back to this story.
Yeah. That's what they're saying.
You know, we've last week, well, it wasn't last week, within the last 2 or 3 weeks, one of the things that came up in one of our conversations was, I'm going to expand on it a little bit more though, the desire or the thirst for status and position and the danger and the trap that comes in leadership with pride, and just wanting more and more and more. And going back to your question, Ron, about Doeg, but I totally agree with you guys in the comments around he's, quote, just a shepherd, and maybe he sees an opportunity to advance a little bit. Saul's obviously making decisions based on status and kind of protecting his position. I know I've brought this up before, but it is such a common thread where pride and status and position, if those things are starting to get into my head and I start chasing after that, bad decisions are very consistently made in that state of mind.
Pride cometh before a fall. Somebody said that one time, didn't
Seems like we've heard that before somewhere, right?
But, like 22 verse 18 is so disturbing because it kills 85 priests. He goes on to kill men, women, and children. I remember his boy shooting a rabbit and it didn't quite die. Sorry, this is probably a little graphic for Sunday morning. But I was like, so messed up by that for a little bit. I was like, Dad's like, well, put your hand on, pop his head on. And I was like, oh, man. I can't imagine just like, all right, Dad, I'm a minister here too, so I would have been one of the first ones to go, Let's start shooting up the ministers, and then we'll start men, women, and children. I don't know. That's just like.
It's like a frenzy almost.
I don't. Oh man, it's just so messed up. It's just so messed up. Yeah.
I'm with you, Sean. I reflected on this last night when Ron shared the reference with me, and I guess it doesn't make sense to try to consider one situation worse than another because they're both terrible. But the now the priests and everybody who got Jesus nailed to the cross, you just can't even hardly imagine that, right? And I see this in a very, very similar way. Doeg knew exactly what he was doing. The Roman contingent that was involved in nailing Jesus to the cross, they didn't have the full understanding of what was going on. But for Doeg and those in leadership in Jesus's day that got the crowd riled up and eventually led to his death, it's hard to imagine that. But then it comes full circle to me. And what are the decisions and the actions and the thoughts that I have, that is certainly not, raising a hammer to drive a nail, but we've all probably been in some kind of a devotional or a setting where we would understand that there are actions and decisions and words and things that I do that is a part of a death, a crucifixion, that it's why he went, is for that. And so what really came all full circle to me was, man, I better not be, pointing any fingers at Doeg or anybody else, and just stay on my knees and submit and do all I can to promote the life that Jesus Christ gave and allows all of us to be standing in front of him cleansed.
So is the lesson for us, keep our ego in check? Is that what you're saying? I'm trying to get it down to me.
I would kind of like, it was hitting me yesterday because I was thinking of how many times have I sat, and I'm guilty of this, sat at my job, maybe belittling another officer because I thought that I was doing that to, how was I showing a good example of that? I've talked bad about other people before.
So were you trying to elevate yourself?
That's what I'm wondering. Was I trying to push him down and make myself, which I'm not that great either. But I've been guilty of that, and that kind of hit me yesterday when I was ready to do this. I was like, I need to keep my mouth shut and probably work a little bit more on my heart.
Well, I think it's interesting. I don't think King Saul told him to kill that town and their livestock and children. I think he just took and went on his own with all that once he got caught up in it. And just curious how far, we say the Lord says this, but then we just add to it and go our own way. And that's what I feel like I have to be careful with, is that I'm doing what the Lord says and not what Gilda says the Lord thinks I should do. So.
The author of this book, he talks about how he was a leader at NASA, and every time he was kind of charged promotions and stuff like that, and every time a position would come up, he'd always get confronted by people and say, hey, tell them a little secret about this guy that's also applying for this position, to try to elevate themselves. Can we see that ever happen in your own life? I hope not, but
Yes, it happens.
yeah. I know it happens in my field for sure. I've seen it. So I would say, yeah, I'm one of the biggest things.
What ultimately happened to Doeg? Does it say?
He died really young at 30, but he doesn't go into description. I think he died at the age of 34. But I don't know. It doesn't give much detail about him. Except for that, I think that's enough detail enough. I mean, he was not obviously a good man. I can't imagine killing infants.
So evidently, he didn't do it all on his own. He's got some.
No,
Yeah,
he
he was the chief.
He
He
recruited.
recruited, so logically, he said to the other guys, hey, let's go do this.
I mean, people would have run.
He probably had men that would just what he was in.
Yeah, people would have gone against him. Sorry.
Oh, no, I was thinking that this whole time, I was like, how would the whole town let one guy do all this, That makes sense.
Hey, Lloyd, you always bring us to what does this mean for me, today, tomorrow, 2021. And what comes to my mind is, so what would look different in some ways? What is the opposite of this? In what way do we serve the Lord if, certain situations come up? And I'm with you, Ron. There's situations that come up and you maybe see some things that either could be done differently, or and how do you respond to that? But the flip side of that is maybe, I mean, this is just in my head. One, I seem to be bringing up the pride and status thing every week, so clearly that's on my heart for me personally. But also, the flip side of this is finding the ways and the places and the actions to encourage people and praise them for what they've done, confirm positive actions, lift somebody up who has maybe made a decision that's led to some consequences, but instead of being the crowd that's burying them, be a part of a crowd that's lifting them. Maybe that's a part of what this trying to find something good in a bad situation can tell us. Because those opportunities are there just as often, I'm sure.
In Psalm 52, David writes about Doeg. Why do you boast of evil, you mighty man? And why do you boast all day long? You who are a disgrace in the eyes of God, your tongue plots destruction, it is like sharpened razor. You who practice deceit, you who love evil rather than good, falsehood rather than speaking the truth. So, I mean,
This is like way off track, just for fun. But like, to me, this is another one of those stories that proves the Bible to be true. It's like, if I was writing this book, I would leave this out. I'd be like, the king realized his failure and repented and prayed to God, and the other guys were like, yeah, you're right, king, we should repent and not do this. And, I think as you read through this, I mean, like you said, David with his little lie to the priest, and then the priest saying, hey, I didn't know anything about any of this. This is the first time I've helped David before, and the king who was supposed to be God's anointed, who had the Spirit of the Lord on him, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, this story's so messed up to leave in a book about how good God is, and how much he loves us. And so I don't know. Like I said, it's a weird side. I don't want to chase that, but it just made me think about all these imperfections, like Peter. I mean, one of the greats, John, Paul, just messed up. Peter tried to take off the guy's ear, but to my knowledge, John and Paul, I guess Paul did try to take people. Yeah, he did take off an ear. Yeah, might have been swinging to kill him. Yeah, I think the guy ducked just right and only lost an ear. But it just kind of reaffirms the fact that if mankind would have come up with this, we would have certified it. We would have made it sound a lot better.
And if the greats can mess up and still get there, then.
Yeah. Sorry, I digress.
no, it's good.
I think that's a great point, Sean. I mean, you're right. Typically, it wouldn't even be written into the story or covered up, or try to make everybody look good or whatever. And it is maybe in that backwards way encouraging, because despite the bad decisions and imperfections and the shortcomings we have, we can still be God's sons and daughters, adopted and with promise. I mean, that's just amazing.
To apply it to real life, for me, in the flight room, it's kind of, I wouldn't say it's like a big competition, but it kind of is. There's only a certain amount of student pilots who are going to be selected for fighters, and so there's your status to kind of draw all parallel. So yeah, status is a huge thing for us. And early on, especially when I was getting airsick, I was like, oh man, I was so stressed out about like my status. I was like, I'm not going to get a 30-day slot. I don't know if this is going to happen. I have to fly heavies, and I never wanted to do that and stuff like that. And I talked to Desiree a lot about it, and I finally just like let go of it and stopped caring about the status. And then all of a sudden, I started, catching up to everybody else. So that's really good. But yeah, I struggle with that too. Like I'm constantly comparing myself and constantly comparing others and see how they're doing. We're all trying to figure out who's going to get one of those fighter slots, and that's just something that I have to deal with. But it's kind of weird that we talk about this on,
First day that.
Yeah.
I was thinking about Jesus in the Sermon on the Mount. He said, again, because I just keep thinking I'd be one of the 85 killed, Because I'm like, dude, I've been the first to go. But anyways, Jesus says, blessed are those who are persecuted for righteousness' sake, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are you when people revile you and persecute you and utter all kinds of evil against you falsely on my account. This is the part that really came to mind. Rejoice and be glad, for your reward is great in heaven. For in the same way they persecuted the prophets who were before you. And I think about a priest just trying to do his duty, trying to, certain people that come in. And I'm telling you, King, I didn't do anything wrong, and then you got killed for it, and all the others around him. And so, anyways, it just kind of struck me that thankful, probably not the whole village is going to be slaughtered for doing right, but maybe that could happen. Jesus says it's a blessing to be like that, because there's a great reward, but you're just like all the people before you that stood up when it was.
Sounds like there's a faith statement in there somewhere.
Yeah.
Isn't it weird that Saul took Doeg's word over the priest? I mean, because he said, hey, I didn't know. And it's not like he got an email that said, I no longer am associated with David.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
I mean, he didn't know that he was after him. Whenever David showed up there. It shows Saul's heart a little bit too.
Yeah.
He wanted.
Heard what he wanted to hear. Yeah.
He was so bloodless, what is something all day?
Yeah.
That is bad. I'm just gonna, I'm assuming God was not very happy with Doeg's. So I don't really talk much about it, but I'm pretty sure he was probably taken out.
Somewhere in there, I believe Doeg was a part of God's plan to show his power through David later. I mean, everything works. God's got a plan.
Heard a preacher will say, God will use you no matter what, so you're his plan. So if you don't want it to be good, be bad, he's going to still use you to glorify his kingdom. So I prefer to be able to do that.
Sean, either you or Ron, I think, mentioned this is a thought that probably David taking responsibility. I'm like, I see that. It's like, well, I don't know, David. At the end of the day, it's the people who take the actions, but that's also in leadership a sign of humility and truth and a self-awareness, a willingness to look inside self and or somehow have that perspective. That's one thing through athletics that I got the opportunity to learn. It wasn't my favorite lesson to learn, but when video became prevalent and you see yourself on video, you can't exactly dispute what was done wrong or how you did it wrong. But that was such a huge, ultimately blessing for me, including spiritually. Because if and when I'm in the right mindset and I'm willing to examine my own actions and take responsibility for poor decisions, admit it, acknowledge it, take it to the Lord, admit it to friends and family and Danae, that's crucial. It's just really, really important part of each of our lives.
Yeah, I think David was unique for sure because he openly admitted his failure. You know, growing up, I always look at David as he's that boy in the field with the heart. He's just this, holding the man that got the heart, which he was, but he failed and he openly admitted to it. Always brought it back to the Lord. I think we need to have the courage to humbly admit our faults too. Take it forward.
Well, the thought that's hit me is that you can only have one highest priority. You can't have two highest priorities, you only have one. And so what is that one highest priority? And it always comes back, if it's trying to seek the Lord, everything else kind of fits. If it's serving myself, it doesn't work quite as good. And so, I mean, that's what I see in here. Okay, well, Doeg's priority here was power. I can see power. Hey, I got the king's ear. I've got his blessing. I'm going to assert myself. I'll do it however I want to do it. And of course, Saul's priority is my ego. I got to be at the top. Okay? And David, he's on this roller coaster. But ultimately, it's following God. And you kind of think about all those giants in faith that everybody quoted. They got sidetracked, but it all came back to serving God. So, I think that's the lesson to me that I hear today is if I will keep my priority right, then my actions will follow that priority. And so, I'm not going to do it right, but I'm going to do it better. And then the blood of Christ covers it. I mean, is the lesson any more, crooked than that? I mean, does it vary too much from that? And I think that's a story over and over in the Bible.
I'd say that pretty much sums it up.
Oh, if we lost our people, we got RuPaul up there.
We're here.
Yeah.
Yeah. We're here. We just lost our
we
lost the TV connection. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I mean, there's an advertisement for RuPaul up there. I don't know if you can see it.
Yeah, I hate when that screen pops up.
I do.
Sean, you turn that thing over.
All right, Sean's coming to fix it.
That's on mine too.
Well,
Do you know how to do it?
well, you can.
Okay.
Yeah, there. Just turn the.
Kind of time, anyways.
Yeah, we are. You can just turn the TV off if you want.
Right, the law.
You want me to?
I don't know what you choose.
Also thinking about
I thought we said that to read this.
All right.
School.
Read to us, read to us.
However, in the cities of the nations of the Lord your God has given you as an inheritance, do not leave anything alive that breathes. Completely destroy them, the Hittites, the Amorites, the Canaanites, Hivites, and Jebusites, as the Lord your God has commanded you. Otherwise, they will teach you to follow all the detestable things they do in worshiping their gods, and you will sin against the Lord. So there's entire cities and populations destroyed by his command. It's our life.
Is that computer situation? Anything else?
I don't have any. It's part of the book. Father, thank you so much for this day and for just this lesson. I pray that it'll be on our hearts. I pray that you will continue to guide us and guide our hearts. And thank you for your son, obviously, and mostly he's the ultimate example that we live by. And it's in his name I do pray.
Amen.
Thank you.